Okay, so welcome to this webinar and thank you everyone so far who have joined us. We're going to be getting started now. I know the time is of essence, so we're going to try to get through this as quick as possible. In the meantime, I thank everyone that is on here so far. As we're going into 2023, hopefully the things that we share here today could be beneficial, not only just to you, but to your entire family. I'm really excited about this, and it's an opportunity that we normally talk about on a year-to-year basis, which is called the New Year's resolution. And yes, we understand that, but the context of it is that, hey, what is it that we could really bring into the new year that could make our life better, and not just our life, but also our family's life and even our friends. So today's webinar is going to be sectioned around that, and it's literally where we're going to look at it from different angles, things that could be shared with you that you could really utilize moving forward, not just the year 2023, but also beyond that. So if you just give me a second, so I could actually pull up the screen and we could get started. And if you have any questions, you could really put them in the chat. And when I get a minute, I'll get back to those questions. But literally, it's the concept of where we're starting out and we're looking at what is called the let's grow mentally. And I do want to apologize for right now. So it was supposed to be two of us here, but because of a circumstance that Mr. Bonaparte is dealing with, he wasn't able to attend today. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to actually put that position where I'm actually doing the dual role. The dual role is where I'm going to share with you guys exactly what Mr. Bonaparte would have been sharing with you guys. And I'm also going to be sharing my component. So starting out, it's a webinar where we're looking at it and we're saying, hey, let's grow mentally. And one thing that I want you to do is to realize that, yes, it is free. We welcome you. No one had to pay to come in. But the other aspect of it that we require is for you to pay attention. So it's a free webinar, but we want you to pay attention. And just as it says on the screen, let's grow mentally. And this is something that we're going to look at now. How could we really grow mentally? But one of the things that I really want you to pay attention to is right here. You see, it says right here and more. These are different things that we're going to be sharing with you, but we want you also to pay attention to this concept, which is called the and more factor. We'll get into that later on. So starting out, presenters introduction. So again, we apologize that Mr. Bonaparte wasn't able to be on here because of his circumstance. We spoke yesterday and he allowed me to just say, hey, do the webinar on your own. And it's what I would call, I got his back. So even though he's in a circumstance, that's my partner. And it was literally where I had the position I could, hey, I could just take his portion out and do it my portion. But what I decided to do was to, hey, I'm going to do your portion in essence of your absence. So this is Mr. Bonaparte, co-founder of the Philadelphia Association of Former Gang Members and Friends, community organizer and advocate for social justice for over 40 years, award committee member, and father, husband, and retiree from Temple University. So if you're here in Philadelphia or some parts of the world, you're aware of what is called Temple University. Right here is where he resides. He was born here in Philadelphia and he resides here in Philadelphia. On the other hand, this is me, Cleous GloWry, founder and president of the Tebet Foundation, author of the Airport Adventure, Live Safely bookazine, over 13 years of being a community organizer and an advocate for social justice. I have a bachelor's degree in human services and psychology. I'm a resident of Philadelphia, via St. Thomas, Jamaica. So I'm an immigrant. I came here, funny enough, yesterday was my anniversary for my 28th year here in America. So why did we decide to do this topic, which is what I'm calling the why factor? So why such topic as let's grow mentally? Why such topic? So I started off to look at what was going on for the past couple of years. And what I realized is that, hey, mental health issues are at an all-time high. According to the Single Care Checkup website, mental health and substance abuse disorders affect 13% of the world's population. That number could increase as people around the world shelter in place and adjust to a new normal amid the coronavirus pandemic. In our national survey on mental health and coronavirus, we found that the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the mental health of 59% of people in the United States. So you're looking at it, more than half the population of the United States has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. According to National Alliance on Mental Health, which is NAMI, 1 in every 5 Americans live with a mental health condition. And this is a significant part for you to understand, which is coming up right now. This means that you, right, you or someone else you know has been impacted with some type of mental health condition. 1 in every 20 Americans is living with a serious mental health condition like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or long-term recurring major depression. Again, major depression. And 50% of all lifetime mental illnesses begins at the age of what? 14. And then 75% of those starts at the age of what? 24. And when you look at the age of 14 to 24, you're talking about our youths. And this is a statistic that I want you to pay attention to as it pertains to our youth. The CDC data gives us more insightful, what you would call into this severe challenge that is being faced by our youth. 55% reported that they experienced emotional abuse by a parent or caregiver. So 55% of our youth recorded that, hey, during this COVID-19 pandemic, they received more emotional abuse from their parent or caregiver. 29% of them reported that a parent or other adult in their home lost a job. So of course, this is also going to impact them. And then 11% of them reported that they experienced what? Physical abuse by a parent or caregiver. So if you look at it, it's either 55% saying that, hey, I was emotionally abused, and 11% is saying that, hey, I was physically abused. And this is something that's very interesting because I'm looking at that, but from a psychological standpoint, as I just mentioned earlier, I have a bachelor's degree in human services and psychology. So one of the things that I became aware of was what is called the rat experiment. So in college, I learned about the rat experiment from a different angle. I was just recently introduced to someone, his name is Dr. Gabor, and I heard him talking about the rat experiment. And from my previous understanding in psychology, I understood about the rat experiment from a different angle, and we'll get into that later. But when I became aware of this, it was talking about how the rat experiment, as it pertains to the mothers, the mother rats, when they lick their younger rats, when they are just born for a certain amount of time, what happens, what they look at was the mothers that licked their younger ones compared to the mothers that didn't. They realized that the younger rats that became adults, the one that got licked from a, what you would call a nurturing standpoint, that their mothers licked them in a certain way, they became more what you would call substantial when it came to what is called certain social things that they had to encounter in comparison to the rats that didn't get that type of licking. So in that experiment, it was actually showing you that a mother's touch could actually help to do what? Significantly help the child when they become an adult and is faced with some type of social difficulty. So when you look at the statistics from here, 59% or 55% of our youths being emotionally abused and 11% of them being physically abused, you know that when it comes to them becoming adult later on in life, they may suffer some type of psychological disorder, which is what this experiment was all about. So the bottom line is what I would call read between the lines. The two, there was a social construct that impacted what? The world, which is the 2019 global pandemic, something that will have a lasting impact on our generations to come. Basically, everyone that has been experiencing this type of pandemic is going to be a part of their memories as they go forward in life. Therefore, it is imperative that we what? Collectively work towards the humanitarian deed of helping and growing each other what? Mentally. So I highlight the word mentally, the word all in mentally, because at the end of the day, all of us are impacted in some way, shape, or form. So we have to create some type of humanitarian social responsibility to say, hey, we're going to help each other what? Grow from a mental capacity. This is where let's grow mentally comes into consideration, and this is just one of the solutions. Like my team and I, we decided, hey, let's do this to help out when we look at that humanitarian social responsibility. And it all comes down to this. It's either we're going to do something about it now, or we face some type of severe residual consequence later in life. It's the do or the don't. So when we looked at it from the concept, why are we coming up with such a topic, let's grow mentally? These were the things that we were looking at. So starting off now, we're going to look at it from a different angle now. Welcome to what is called Let's Grow Mentally. One universe. So there's one universe that we're accustomed to, one global unit, one mind system, one you, one me, but we are all connected mentally. So there's this thing called telepathy, right? And we can telepath our energy and connect with each other. And that is because we're what? We're connected mentally. So when we look at it from that standpoint, we started to realize that, hey, we're all in this, what is called our solar universe. So we're all connected some way, shape, or form. Even though you may have, say, I think they're now saying we only have 8 planets. Even though we have 8 planets, all those 8 planets connect with each other. Why? Because they're in the same solar system. And it's the same thing that we're looking at now. Even though we're that individual person that's created, there's a you, there's a me, we're all connected mentally. And that mental capacity is where we're looking at it from that one mindset. So we'll get into that later on. But it all comes down to this. An active mind is a source of power. We'll get into this as we go further, but I want you to really pay attention to this. An active mind is a source of power. So starting out now, we're going to look at what I would call the circumstance. So the circumstance is where, this is where Mr. Bonaparte would have come in and talk about his circumstance. And as I'm sharing about Mr. Bonaparte's circumstance, we all are faced with what is called a circumstance. So this right here is Mr. Bonaparte. You can see him on his scooter. This right here, you could also see is cane, using a cane to actually go around. And then this right here is his gloves. So for me, I know of what's going on with his story. But as I said, look at it from a circumstance. We're all faced with some type of circumstance in life. And this is his current circumstance that is in, where he has to be mobile by using what is called the wheelchair, or he has the cane. And the gloves, I'll share the gloves with you as far as what you utilize them for in the upcoming slide. But at the end of the day, present this to your own self. What type of circumstance are you in? We are all faced with some type of circumstance. And once again, I want to highlight this. An active mind is a source of power. So this is the circumstance of Mr. Bonaparte, which is my partner. Again, we apologize for him not being here today, but I want to do the justice to actually share his story because it actually ties into where we're going with this concept around let's grow mentally. So from the circumstance, we go to what is called a situation. So we're all faced with some type of circumstance in life. And then now it transitioned to what is called the situation. The situation is looking at it now from a personal standpoint, not from like a global standpoint anymore. So this is his situation. He is a trustee, building maintenance of mechanic, community organizer, father and husband, and extended family member, where he constantly communicates and engages with his extended family. But since the COVID-19 pandemic, which impacted many of us across the globe, he went into what is called retirement. And when his retirement, now that's when he actually started to get this, what is called the illness. And I want you to pay attention to this, right? So COVID came in, he retired, and then now he started to suffer from this type of illness. But look at this now. He has all the flu shots, pneumonia shots, the shingles shots, the COVID, 3 COVID-19 shots, which is right here. This is actually his vaccination card. And he's under Temple Medical Healthcare System. Temple has one of the best healthcare system in the country, right? But look at this now. He has to go to what? He has been to the feet doctor, the dermatologist, the neurologist. He has done blood tests, the EKG, EKG, and the MRI. He has done all of this, right? And regardless of what he has done, from the feet doctor, the dermatologist, the neurologist, the blood test, all of this he has done, and they still can't figure out what's going on. So his situation right now is where he's in a depressive state. And why is he in a depressive state? Because he's coming from where he was what, a trustee, a building maintenance person, a community organizer, a father, a husband, and extended, and other things, right? So now he's not able to actually do it because of his situation that he's in. So he is in this depressive state. What he expressed to me, hey, at times I'm scared and I'm fearful. That's where that anxiety would come into play, which is why he has the what? The cane or the cart. And that is to actually help him balance as he's going around. So he's like, hey, I'm older now, and I'm fearful that I'm going to be walking down the street or going somewhere and I'm going to fall. And guess what? I can't get back up. So basically, when he looked at the whole circumstance right now, his situation is where he has been to all the professionals, right? And they told him, hey, this is what they think is going on, and they try to correct that, then that's not what is going on. So he has been to all these different people, and they're not actually giving him a viable solution as far as what's going on. So his last resort right now is where he placed his faith in God, which is at a higher level. So this is his situation. And then now going back to this again, I'm reiterating this because this is something important. An active mind is a source of power. So we are leaving from a situation now, and we're going to look at what is called the occasion. The occasion is this. Physically, right? He is restricted from doing certain things in his day-to-day activities, right? His daily routine, he's not able to do certain things. Not being able to attend certain community meetings anymore. And this could actually get a person into that depressive state because you were so accustomed to going to all these places, and the things that you use to livelihood your life, you're not able to do them anymore. The same thing now, it prevents him from what? Certain social engagement, like this particular engagement, he's not able to attend because of the situation that he's actually in. Now he's getting what? Help from family and friends, which is not something that he's accustomed to. He's this independent person that normally thrive on doing things for himself, but he's in a different situation now where he has to be getting help from what? Friends and family members. And now he has what? Difficulty driving, which is why you saw the gloves. So right now, from a tactile standpoint, he's not able to touch certain things and get a good grip on it. So the gloves that you saw earlier, those are the gloves that he has been utilizing just for him to drive, right? And then it goes into also accessing certain amenities. He's not able to access them anymore. So when we look at that now, we're coming from a situation where it starts out with what is called a circumstance, which we're all faced with a circumstance. And from there, it went into a situation. And then now the occasion of his life is where certain things are restricted. So again, I want to actually highlight this. An active mind is a what? A source of power. So, you know, back in the days, we used to get this concept where it says a mind is a terrible thing to waste. And believe it or not, this is something that I want you to pay attention to, because when it comes to the brain hears the first, middle, and the last thing that we actually say. So if they've been telling us for years, say, hey, the mind is a terrible thing to waste. What's in at the beginning? A mind. What's in the middle? Terrible. What's at the end? Waste. So the things that we were actually being programmed in the background was saying a mind, terrible, waste. So if your mind hears that on a daily basis, right, then this is what you're going to fortitude towards your life. So I'm now reversing it, and this is something that I want you to pay attention to. An active mind is a source of power. So with all that said now, based on the factor of looking at what's been going on with Mr. Bonaparte, I started to realize that this is what is called the power of accumulation. What is the power of accumulation? So his retirement, it took him years for him to retire. He didn't just go to Temple one day and working for Temple, and then guess what? He retired the next day. It takes a good amount of time for him to get to that retirement stage. The same thing now for his illness that he's now going and undertaking. It took some time for him to get to that healed state, even though it's showing up right now. So what I started to look at was modifying the concept of what is called life and death is in the power of accumulation. What am I talking about when I talk about either modify or life and death is the power of accumulation? So retirement, we have this life that we say, hey, we want to get to that point where we're able to what? Retire. So that's our life. But in the reality of it, this is what's been coming in, illnesses. So the illnesses can lead to what is called death. So I started to look at it from now a different angle where I'm saying life and death is in the power of accumulation. And I started to understand this now, which is called ROI. And ROI is actually associated with people who normally do what we call investment. So it's a return on investment. So what we do on a day-to-day basis, even though we're not investing in some type of financial industry, what we do on a day-to-day basis, it accumulates certain things in our life, which is the ROI. But then I started to think about it. Let's reverse this now and looking at it from a different angle. ROI, the power of accumulation, which means that whenever you have a circumstance, a situation is going to be present at some point, and then there's going to be occasion. So I just walked you through the circumstance that Mr. Bonaparte is in, the situation that was presented to him, and then now the occasion that actually now prevent him from doing certain things. And I led it to what I would call the modification of now looking at it from the context of what is called retire or illness. So the ROI that we're actually faced with today is, are we going to get to retire, or is there some type of illness that's going to actually come into play and what? and causes us to go into that dead stage. So when we started to look at this now, I wanted something to help validate this, right? And the person that I found to really help validate it, his name is Dr. Gabor Mate, right? And again, I want to emphasize this. An active mind is a source of power. So this is what Mr. Gabor had to say, and I want you to really pay attention to this video.
You define normal?
The word normal has a entirely proper usage when we refer to something that's natural and healthy and necessary. So as a physician, I can tell you that outside a normal range of physiological parameters, life is not possible. Now, the myth comes in when in our culture we assume that the way we live and the way this culture is organized and the values of it and how we conduct ourselves in it, because it's the norm, that's how we do it. Statistically, it's the norm. That therefore is also natural and healthy. And what I'm suggesting is that what is considered normal in this society is actually toxic to human well-being. So that the second meaning of the myth of normal then is that the assumption, therefore, that people who get sick, who get illness mentally or physically, those are considered abnormal. I'm saying no. Those are normal responses to an abnormal environment.
How do you define normal?
So if you listen carefully to Dr. Gabor just now, and this is someone who I was just recently introduced to, and I took some time out to really sit down and pay attention to the things that he's been saying. And he has 30 plus years experience of being a physician. And if you just listen to the video, he's telling us that, hey, the things that are actually causing us to be sick and go into this illness is the environment of what we would consider being normal. So the idea behind this is really looking at it from a standpoint of understanding that these things that we do on a day-to-day basis and we may think that they're normal, these are the things that are getting us sick and getting us ill. So now when you look at Mr. Bonaparte's situation, and I'm talking about ROI, retire or illness, the concept is looking at it from a standpoint that these things that have been given to us has been making us ill or sick. And while I'm emphasizing Dr. Gabor's point of view, it's like literally something that I saw in psychology while I was being taught about psychology. That these were the same things that were given to us that literally was making us sick. So when I started to look at it now from a standpoint of understand certain things, it's like, hey, we got to go to a whole new realm of finding new things that could be applicable to our lives so we can get to that stage of what? Retirement, and not being faced with some type of illness or sickness. So with that said, I'm looking at it again. Once again, an active mind is a source of power. So just looking at what was presented so far, I decided to come up with three solutions. The first one is looking at it from what I would say, finding new methods that are what? Natural. And you heard Dr. Gabor just talk about it. We need to find new ways to actually naturalize the who we are, finding natural things to do. And it's funny because, yes, I know what the concept is when we talk about natural, but I never really understood natural until I started to build this online course, which we're going to be offering later on. But this is the point where I started to understand what natural is really about, not from what was taught to me before. And in the course, I was able to break it down and now start to look at the concept of what is called natural. Again, from a psychological standpoint, these are things that we may be given and say, oh, these are things are natural. But when you look at it, the illness and sicknesses that arrive in our life, they can't be natural. So until we understand the concept of what natural is really about, it's understanding that component now is going to be able to now take us to the next level of where we need to go. And then the second thing that I saw was that, hey, be more reliable on you. Like even Mr. Bonaparte's circumstance, he has been to all these different doctors and they still can't diagnose and tell him what's going on. So he's now becoming more reliable and now going towards that self-help regimen where he's literally looking at things that he could do for himself just to cope with life right now, which includes what? Caring family members, getting family members who are caring. And yes, we all have families, but not every one of them care about us. So guess what? You have to find those caring family members, and the same thing with friends. We all have a lot of friends, but we have to find those true friends that could actually help us in this circumstance. And the last one is looking at it from what I would say, rely on a higher spiritual source or sources. And as you saw it, that's one of the things Mr. Bonaparte is doing right now, because he placed his whole belief in the what? Mankind. He went to all these different doctors and specialists. He's like, hey, I'm coming to you because this is what's going on now and I need help. And it's like they're not able to help him. So now he started to put his faith in God, and literally he's seen more improvement in that area. But I wanted to go down to this concept right here. And this is coming from who I would call Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein says the significant problems we have cannot be solved at the same level of thinking with which we created them. And this is a big breakthrough for me because I'm coming from the psychological world where we deal with mental and behavioral health on a day-to-day basis. And it's like understanding now when you listen to Dr. Gabor and he's saying, hey, these things that we thought were natural, right, are not natural. In the context of looking at it now, these environments, that's the environment that we're in. And if you're in that environment, then you can't look in that environment to find the solutions. You have to actually go into what? Another environment. And this comes down to this again. Once again, an active mind is a source of power. An active mind is a source of power. So with all that is said now, we're going into the part now. This is what we actually talked about. We talked about sharing 5 significant things that could help you move your life forward as we're going into what? 2023 and even beyond. So this is actually where we're going to be going now. We're going to be sharing with you now 5 unique methods that you can apply to your life and make your life better, or even for your friends and family. So starting out, we're going to what is called the Great Depression. And the Great Depression is all based on this concept. What can we learn or discover from the past? So as it pertains to looking at what's going on with the pandemic and how it has a severe impact on us, majority of the people are going into what is called a depressive state. So understanding this now, you can look at something else that is in correlation to that depressive state that the body would go into and then learn from it. So I started to look at what is called the Great Depression. And once again, I want to reiterate this: an active mind is a source of power. So Bob Marley said it in one of his songs, in this great future, you cannot forget your past. So if you really think about that, in this great future, which is the future that's coming up, he's saying that you can't forget your past, because in your past, there is something significant that you can utilize to make your future what? Great. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to share with you a video that we're going to look at the Great Depression and then see what is it that you can take away from this video to actually now help what? The future of what is to come, 2023 or even beyond. So this video right here, which is a short video, it's going to give you an explanation of what really caused the Great Depression. Going back to what I said, the power of accumulation. The Great Depression didn't just happen overnight. So let's look and see what is it that they articulated or pinpointed that this is what caused the Great Depression.
But as for this country, I stand or fall by my refusal to accept as a necessary condition of our future a permanent army of unemployed.
What caused the Great Depression? In the popular imagination, the Wall Street speculation and the 1929 stock market crash were to blame. In fact, the American economic boom of the 1920s was built on shaky foundations. The stock market crash did not so much cause the depression as help unleash a chain of events that exposed the long-standing vulnerabilities in the American economy.
The Great Depression was caused by a combination of long and short-term factors. 1. The economy lacked diversity. Prosperity rested too heavily on a few basic industries, notably construction and automobiles. 2. Unequal wealth distribution undercut consumer demand. During the 1920s, workers' wages were too small to create an adequate market for the goods the economy was producing. 3. The banking system was unstable. During the 1920s, nearly half of Americans lived in rural areas. Many farmers were deeply in debt and could not pay off their loans. 4. International credit and trade was threatened. At the end of World War I, our allies owed large sums of money to American banks. This led the Allies to insist on large reparation payments from the defeated Germans and Austrians at the Versailles Peace Conference. But when these nations experienced economic troubles, they became unable to make their reparations payments. American banks then made large loans to Germany and Austria, which they then used to pay their reparations and other debts. This created a dangerous cycle whereby the entire system of reparations and war debts payments, including war debts owed to the United States, was dependent on funds borrowed from the American banks.
All these underlying problems came to a head on October 29, 1929, a day that came to be called Black Tuesday. Within a week, stock values plummeted nearly 40%. They wouldn't return to pre-crash levels until 1954.
I do not want to think that it is the destiny of any American to remain permanently on relief roll.
All right, so that right there is giving you a sample of what caused the Great Depression. And if you are going through that stage of your life where you're depressed or you know someone that's depressed, just look at this concept of what was just presented to you. It didn't happen overnight, and it took different factors to actually get to what we call the Great Depression. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you a shorter video because I want you to get it from a different angle as well, not just from just one angle. And the reason why I'm sharing this, because being in a depressive state, you typically see just one angle. And that's what's a big factor in causing the depression. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to show you from a different angle. What can we learn from the past to influence our future? So this right here now is actually looking at it, the same concept of what? Depression, the Great Depression, but we're going to look at it from a different angle now.
Why the Great Depression was the ultimate snowball effect. The snowball effect is a process that starts with something fairly small until it builds in size to become very powerful. The stock market crash of 1929 was by no means minimal, but it was just the beginning of the giant snowball known as the Great Depression. On October 29, 1929, the stock market tanked, and that was Black Tuesday. 2 months later, stockholders had lost over $40 billion. Some people mistakenly believe Black Tuesday is the same as the Great Depression, but it was just one piece of the puzzle. The major loss in capital from Black Tuesday resulted in over 9,000 banks failing. Since the banks were uninsured, people lost their entire life savings when the banks began shutting their doors. Banks that did survive were too hesitant to provide new loans, slowing down the economy even further and creating a bigger snowball. People of all classes stopped buying things. No one buying things meant no need to make things, and that caused more job losses. At one point, unemployment was over 25%. Quick comparison, the unemployment rate since the Great Depression. As businesses continued failing, the government created a tariff that charged high taxes on foreign imports, and that hurt rather than helped. as trade and demand for US goods decreased. The stock market, high tariffs, banks closing, and unemployment, they all combined to make one giant snowball that was impossible to stop until it finally ran out of steam, 10 years after destroying everything in its path.
So you just saw it from a different angle, right? And regardless of what angle you saw it from, you saw that it is what I would call the power of accumulation. So yeah, we had the Great Depression, but it didn't just happen overnight. And it's the same thing that I could say with the pandemic. The global pandemic didn't happen overnight. And I just want you to read between the lines to really understand what's going on. So nothing that impacts us on a global level happens overnight. And it's the same thing with your life. Now, if you look at it and you're going through that depressive state or you have anxiety that you're dealing with, like, it didn't happen overnight and it's not going to be resolved overnight. There are little things that you would have to do, which is what I call the power of small efforts that are what? Accumulated. This is actually the process of what is used in the wealth building strategy. So I was able to understand that and say, hey, if you're able to build wealth with this by doing little things and it accumulates over the years, then that's the same thing that's going to happen to a person if they accumulate certain things in their life on an ongoing basis. So I started to understand this concept by me studying the Great Depression and understanding, hey, if I'm dealing with people of today and they're talking about depression and stuff like that, it's like, all right, where do we have depression in our society? And how could I look at it and start to understand what was really going on to cause it? And then understand this now can be translated into someone's life to now help them get out of that state, which is the concept of using what is called the power of small efforts, right? Which now look at it and saying, hey, depression is something that significantly impacts us what? Mentally. So when you're going through that mental depression, it is something that's going to really impact you mentally. So let's go through the concept of the title again. Let's go what? Mentally. Because from an experience, you have to understand that, hey, if there's a social construct that actually comes here called what is called the pandemic, it's going to mentally impact us. And a part of it is going to make us what? Imbalance. So now when you look at it from a standpoint, your full potential is based on what? Small accumulations. So if you're in a depressive state or anxiety or in the stress factor of your life, look at how you can do small things to now generate a bigger impact later on. This is actually shown here, the lemon and the lemonades. You know, they normally say, hey, when you get a lemon, turn it into what? Lemonade. So if you look at the word lemon, it has what? 5 letters. Lemonades have what? 8 letters. So in order for you to turn your lemon into lemonade, you have to do what? More. The same thing now, it's called the mess and the message. People normally say, hey, when you're in a mess, turn it into a what? A message, which is a testimony, right? So you look at that now, again, 4 letters in comparison to what? 7 letters, test and testimony. When you get a test, you turn it into a testimony. So when you start to understand those things now, if you're faced in a depressive circumstance, you have to do what? More. You can't do less. Otherwise, it's going to succumb you, which now leads to this concept. The word great ends with the word what? Eat. What are you feeding yourself mentally? You know, they normally say, hey, food for thought. I started to understand it's not just food for thought. It's like, what is it that you're feeding yourself mentally? And this is something that I could actually attest to, my testimony. So I went through this state called depression. And when I was going through that depressive state is understanding that, hey, how do I come out of this circumstance, right? And I found a unique way to actually come out of it, which is actually going into what I would call the airport industry. Something that I never thought that would be possible. But from that context, I went into a whole different environment, going back to what Einstein said earlier, right? The same level of thinking that created the problem can't be the level of thinking that's going to get you out. So it's looking at it saying, hey, you have to go somewhere else. And for me, it was literally going through that process of my life where I was going through depression, and I was able to utilize what is called the airport or the aviation industry to pull myself out of that. So this is something that you can really understand as we talk about the first component that I want to share, looking at it as far as what is called the power of accumulation and how you can take small efforts and accumulate them to have a build what is called the wealth building strategy for your life. And it doesn't have to be financial wealth. So if you're in that position where later on in life you can retire and you're not succumbed by some type of illness or sickness, then you have found what is called the wealth building strategy to actually help you to get to that retirement. So that is the first thing. The second thing that we plan to share is around the concept of sleeping, right? And Benjamin Franklin says it right here: early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise, right? Again, I just want to reiterate this. An active mind is a source of power. So let's look at it from a sleeping standpoint. How could you do something with your life that significantly improve your life? And this is something that's natural, right? So two sleeping pillars that I started to understand: people who are disturbed or impacted mentally do not exercise their full sleeping capability. It becomes what? A disability. Therefore, you must learn or discover how to be what? Safe and balanced. This actually is coming from what I would call the airport nest. And I'm calling it the airport nest because this is what they build their house on: safety and balance. And understanding the airport itself, this is how I was able to translate this into my life and start the accumulated journey of getting out of that depressive state. So it led to this. Yes, the airport talks about safety, but when it comes to the human life, I couldn't actually accumulate that same concept as far as FAFETY. So I had to now find something that's going to associate with the human form, and I move it from SAFETY to now SAYFTY. And that is actually tied into what is called the freedom of speech, which is one of the first amendment in the US Constitution. So in the background, you have to understand this. It's not just saying giving people freedom of speech, but also understanding if you don't give people the ability to speak, you're going to have a country that's in havoc. So when I started to understand that now, that's where I started to really pay attention to safety. So if you know my story and how I was able to first start that journey of coming out of actually depression, was me being in a situation where I was able to safely say what was bothering me inside. And that was the first step of me accumulating a journey that came out of that depressive state. The next part of it was understanding that balance is to an equilibrium scale or departures and arrival or ocean waves. What do I mean by this? So balance is what is called the equilibrium scale. So you have an equilibrium scale. What is on one side is going to be on the other. That balance is the scale. But if you actually think about it from the airport standpoint, you have what is called departure and arrivals. The concept behind that is that, hey, the amount of flight that departs has to be the amount of flight that comes in. You can't have too much flight departing and then no flight coming in. It makes the airport what? Imbalance. And for those who have ever been to the ocean waves, they come to the shore, right? They depart to the shore and then they what? They go back into the deep. You truly have to understand that, like, this is something that I started to study and understand, and now understood it from an angle where, hey, the ocean waves on a day-to-day basis, the waves comes out to the shore and then it goes back out into the deep. And it does it on a day-to-day basis. So a part of us being able to sleep well at night, you have to be able to get the things that are inside of you to come out, as much as you're putting things inside of you on a day-to-day basis. If there's an imbalance, then that's going to keep you up at night and not being able to what? You're not being able to sleep. And that is a part of what I would call grounding or arching. And I'm going to get to that just in a short bit. But when I started to look at it from here goes the regular spelling, right? Safety and balance significantly prevents the airplanes from what? Crashing, going into an emergency, or accumulating some form of fatality. Like me studying the airport and understanding this, I was like, wow. So if the airport needs the plane not to crash, they have to first go into what is called safety and balance. They have to make sure that the passengers are safe. And I'm not sure if anyone knows about this, but every plane that's at the gate before it actually goes on the runway, it has to be balanced. Why? Because if they don't balance it, and once it goes up in the air, there's going to be some type of emergency, some type of crash, or some type of fatality. And that's how I started to understand, hey, this is applicable to our own life as well. They do the same for your ability to sleep well at night. When you have things that are bothering you on a day-to-day basis and it's internally inside and you don't get to say it, you don't sleep well at night. If you do things on a day-to-day basis and there's more coming inside of you than that's going out, you don't get to sleep well at night. And this is what I want to share with you, how imperative sleeping is. Look at this right here. It says, sleep keeps us what? Healthy and functioning well. It lets your body and brain repair, restore, and re-energize. If you don't get enough sleep, what's going to happen? You might experience what? Side effects like what? Poor memory or focus, weakened immunity, and mood changes. Most adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night, not each week, each night. So when you look at the sleep concept of your life moving forward into 2022, 2023, you have to take this in consideration because it does this. It repairs the body and brain. So majority of these illnesses that we're having is around what? Us not being able to sleep well at night. Because the body doesn't get to do what? Repair itself, restore and re-energize. And then it leads to what is called poor immunity, right? Right here, poor immunity. During the pandemic, this was one of the big things that they were talking about. Hey, do something to what? Strengthen your immune system. This is a factor right here that you can naturally use for your life. Right here, it says it, natural, no type of fertilizer. It's a natural way of you repairing and restoring and re-energizing your body and your brain. It is done through the avenue of sleeping. And here's my testimony, which I call ground money. Right here, I was talking about grounding and arcing, right? So grounding, my ground money, which is the concept of testimony, but I'm using it in the form of ground. So I recently came back from Jamaica. And before I went to Jamaica, I actually purchased this grounding mat, and I was utilizing it here before I actually went to Jamaica. But I didn't see the effect of it. When I went to Jamaica, which was like a week and a half ago, I actually did what is called the grounding experiment. And what I did on the natural ground, I would walk barefooted. And I did it for about 45 minutes to an hour. Funny enough, people who are seeing me walking barefooted and they're like, hey, where's your shoes? Because it looked crazy for someone to be walking around barefooted. But I was doing the concept of what is called grounding. And believe it or not, this is what happened. That night when I went to sleep, I slept well. But the next morning that I woke up, when I looked on my feet were swollen. Like both of my feet were swollen. And I recall me sharing what I was going to do with a friend. And he was like, no, I'm not doing it because I tried it before and my foot was swollen. So when I woke up the next morning and realized that my feet were swollen, I realized the connection that my friend had said. But the interesting part, even though my feet were swollen, when I touched them, like there was no type of hurt or anything. I didn't feel no type of pain. And in fact, I didn't even know that they were swollen. It was accidentally, I was looking down and I saw them and I'm like, why is my foot so swollen? That's how I saw it, because there was no type of pain. It was more like just a puff. They were puffy, right? So from that concept, for 3 days, my legs were swollen. I came back to America, and the night before I went to bed, I recall I looked on my feet and they were swollen. I woke up the next morning and I jumped out of bed, because when I looked around, my room is where you can see light. The sun is shining. And when I jumped up out of bed, I thought I'd overslept. I thought I had overslept because I was looking at the sun that's shining inside the room. But what I realized at that particular moment, I had slept like a baby that night. And before I went to bed that night, I checked my legs and they were what? The concept of what I would call swollen. But in the morning when I woke up and I look at my leg, went natural. They were right back into order. But that night I could tell you that I slept like a baby, to the point where I woke up that morning thinking that I'd overslept. So I understand the concept of what is called grounding. Grounding is when you ground yourself on the earth, and it allows you to do what is called the release of certain extra energy inside of you. And that's what I was able to do. And I'm telling you, I slept like a baby that night, to the point where I jumped up that morning thinking that I'd overslept for my class that I was supposed to go teach. So in 2023, you want to look at this as a sleeping factor. Yes, we're so accustomed to going to the doctors and doing this, but this right here is something that we need to insert in our life on a day-to-day basis, making sure that you're getting enough rest. Why? Because it restores the body and it restores the brain. So that is the second thing that I would like to share with you, from a standpoint of giving you things that you can move your life forward in 2023. Next thing now, and I want you to pay attention to this. It's called the flea experiment. And real quick, I want to highlight just these two things. One right here, all life is an experiment. The more experiments you make, the better. Once again, I'm highlighting this. An active mind is a source of what? Of power, a source of power. So let's look at what is called the flea experiment. I learned about this in psychology, and I was very, it made a significant impact on my thoughts the day that I learned about it in psychology. So look what really goes on in society that you may not even understand.
Training fleas requires a glass jar with a lid. The fleas are placed inside the jar and the lid is then sealed. They are left undisturbed for 3 days. Then, when the jar is opened, the fleas will not jump out. In fact, the fleas will never jump higher than the level set by the lid. Their behavior is now set for the rest of their lives.
Look at this now.
And when these fleas reproduce, their offspring will automatically follow their example.
So that is the flea experiment, and it showed you what was done to a group of adult fleas. And they were only able to jump at a certain limit because they were limited. And not only did that happen in their life, the children that they had later on, the younger fleas, did the same thing. When I learned about that in psychology, it was something that made me really started to think about what really goes on in our community in this manner, that when we look at our greatness, it's still in that ordinary state. Because these are experiments that has been done with certain type of insects or animals, and they now apply them to our life. There's the rat experiments. I learned this in psychology, project housing. So they build project housing. If you notice, different from someone who lives in the suburbs compared to someone who lives in the project. The project is going up, that elevator concept. And they know that they did what is called the rat experiment, where they place certain rats at the bottom and then what you would call terrorize them and see what would happen at the rats that are at the top of them. So they know that, hey, when we build these type of projects, housing, and we allow people to live in them, then what happens at the bottom actually goes up at the top. And this is also coming back from what I talked about with the mother rat, nurturing environments. They know these things. And then there's also this that I learned in psychology as well, the dog experiment, the Pavlov's classical conditioning. How do you get the dog to salivate by just ringing a bell? And these are things that they have done. So what I'm suggesting for you moving forward in 2023, experiment with your life and find the best practices that will what? Work for you, your family, and even what? Friends. And I want you to look at this. Push your realities and your knowledge. The things that you know right now, you are so, you wouldn't even understand how many things are out there that we still not aware of. So for 2023, you want to do this concept, push your realities, push your knowledge beyond the ordinary. And this is based on what? Traditions, culture, and languages. Tradition is where you can have a young lady that's cooking the same way her mom or grandmom taught it. And she never moved away from that same concept of how they cook. The same thing in our culture, especially in our brown and black and brown cultures. It's like it's predominant where it says, hey, we're going to be doing sports and entertainment. Like we can push beyond these things. The same thing, languages. I pay attention to the languages that we typically use with each other. It's more destructive languages than constructive language. So we'll find a way to what? Create destruction in our life rather than finding new ways to actually do things. So for me, I'm encouraging you as 2023 is coming, start to push your own reality. And I could challenge anyone on here. If you push your reality, you'll find a new reality. How do I know it? Because I went through this. This is my ear money, my testimony talking about the ear as in the airport. The world knows the airport right now as a transportational hub. For the last 4 years, I've been pushing the limit of that and saying, hey, the airport could now be what is considered an healing modality. And this is one of the reasons why I was able to actually set up the course, that I was able to complete it, because I'm using the concept of what I've found during my experiment or my research or my studies over the last 4 years and realized that, hey, this could be a healing modality, but nobody has pushed it to that level before. So for me, I could equate my things that I'm doing in my life now around pushing the reality. And for 2023, you have to push the reality. Even going back to the flea video, if you see what has been done to us and you still realize that, hey, I'm in this circumstance and you're not pushing to see if you can jump beyond 6 inches, then you're going to be in that same concept of what is called ordinary. And even in this context right here, it's called the electrical circuit. This is something that I'm pushing because, yes, I have a degree in computer technology. And while I was in that degree process, I actually learned about where we did this experiment where we get the battery, the wires, and the bulb. We put the negative and the positive, and we get the light. And I'm in a process right now where I'm experimenting and saying, hey, what else can be done with such a circuit? And it's me pushing the reality for 2023 to come. So I would encourage you, hey, for 2023, push the reality. When you look at the flea experiment, the rat experiment, the dog experiment, and I could tell you other experiments that has been done from a psychological standpoint, they were placed in our life to destroy us. This is what Dr. GloWry is talking about. The things that may look normal or the things that are now designed to us cause us ill or sick. So this is actually the third thing. The fourth thing that we're going to look at is what is called conquering your ORG. And real quick, before I even go into what is called conquering your ORG, I want to break it down because a part of life, you really have to understand how things are truly connected with each other. Like for me, I never realized that the airport was connected to my life until I started to study and understanding and realizing that my life is different, but at the end of the day, it's the same concept as the airport. So conquering your ORG, what is ORG? Let's look at this. If you do not conquer self, you you will be conquered by self. And this is coming from Napoleon Hill. Once again, if you do not conquer self, you will be conquered by self. And I can't stop reiterating this for you to truly understand it. An active mind is a source of power. So what is this concept around conquering your ORG? What is your ORG? Starting out, ORG is the acronym for what? Organization, non-profit organization. Non-profit organizations were created to make the world a better place. This is where you have social causes. The root word in organization is what? Organ. The organs make your world, which if you really look at the word world, you could actually see the word word in it. The organs make your world a better place to live and operate daily. And this is the driving point. Every organ has a specific space in the body and act specifically towards a task. So if you understand this now, let's show you now what is your ORG. O is for occupation, and I'm not talking about occupation as in a job. We'll get to what the occupation is really about. R is for what is called relocation, and then G is for germination. So this is what you have to understand here. Anything that occupies what? A space has the potential to relocate through the means of what is called germination. Anything that occupies a space has the potential to relocate through the means of what is called germination. So from where you are right now, we're going to do this mental ORG balloon activity. What I want you to do from where you are right now, I want you to get a balloon, just from a mental standpoint. Just think that you have a balloon. And what I want you to do is to blow air into that balloon. And if you blow air into that balloon, you'll see that the balloon is getting bigger, right? All right. Let's look at the ORG of the balloon now. What is occupying that balloon? What is occupying that balloon is actually air. So if you have someone that's right in front of you, right? And you would now take that blown balloon and you squeeze it. What is going to be in that context of what you would call relocate to that person? Air. Why? Because that is what is occupying the space of the balloon. So it can now be relocated when you squeeze that balloon. For instance, you know, some people will talk about bad breath, right? So suppose someone blew it up and they use some type of bad breath. So now when that person is standing in front of you and you actually blow the balloon on them, right? Squeeze the balloon on them, then now it goes into what is called the process of relocation to that person. And now it's going to start to what? Germinate in that person if that person is now breathing that type of air. So when you look at that contingency, it's understanding that anything that occupies a space has the potential to relocate, and then it actually starts to what? Germinate. Take, for instance, let's get rid of the air. Let's put water in the balloon. The same thing. What is occupying the balloon? Water. If you squeeze it, what is going to relocate? Water. What has the potential to now germinate outside? Water. So understand this. Anything that occupies your life is going to be relocated some way, shape, or form. And then it's only a matter of time before it germinates. How do I know this? It's a concept of your organ. Your organ occupies a specific space in your body, and then it does something specifically. And it's the same concept. Anything that you have that occupies your life is going to be relocated some way, shape, or form, and it's only a matter of time before it starts to germinate. And this now, I would talk about my org money. And this in itself, at one point, what happened in my depression is that it occupied a space where I thought these friends did me wrong. And that is what actually led me into the depression. And it started to impact my what? My mind. Then it relocated into what is called my eating habit, which means that, hey, I wasn't eating at that particular time. Then it relocated in my sleeping pattern. So at night, I wasn't able to sleep. So when I started to look at these things, whatever occupied my mind at that particular time started to relocate in my life. And it's only a matter of time before it germinated. Because now I was feeling like, hey, I need to get revenge on these friends. Luckily, something intervened and I went a different path. But back then, I was thinking about how do I germinate what's inside of me, that pain, that anger. How do I germinate that to those friends that did me and put me in that depressive state? So it's something that I understood. And when I started to understand it now, what I was able to do, I was able to actually put it as a part of the course, where you truly have to understand these things that occupies your day-to-day thought, which is that mental capacity. They have the power to now relocate somewhere else in your life. And then it's only a matter of time before they begin to germinate. The last and final thing that I want to share with you is where we call the depression. So we started out with what is called the Great Depression, and now I want to share with you the depression. This is another thing I want you to understand as you're going forward for 2023. I am not using my depression as an excuse. Trust me, I would give anything to function normally on a day-to-day basis. So people who are facing with depression, they don't function effectively on a day-to-day basis. And this is where this comes in again. An active mind is a source of power. So let's look at this from what is called the academic standpoint. We're going to break down the concept of depression from an academic standpoint. What is called the prefix, the main word, and the suffix. What is the prefix? The prefix is D, depression, D, right? D means off. What is the main word? Press. So if you look at the word depression, you'll see in the middle of it, it says the word press. What does press really mean? Pressure. So when you look at coal and diamond turning into a diamond, there's pressure that's applied. When you look at cooking certain meat, then you use what is called pressure cooker. When you look at what is called rape, there's certain type of pressure. So when you apply pressure to your life, it does something. So the prefix is what? D, the main word is press. And then the last one now, which is a suffix, it is what? It is the ion. And what is the ion? Pay attention to this. What is the ion? An atom or molecule with a net electric charge, due to what? A loss or gain of one or more elements. And most people are in that depressive state. They're in a loss, right, of what you would call energy. A loss of one or more electrons. Electrons is energy. So when you look at it from a concept of depression, if you're able to break it down from an academic standpoint, you realize that it is something of pressure that's pressuring you in this capacity. Inside of you, there's an electrical charge that had some type of loss. So it's now pressuring you, and this is what people would call depression. This is something that I truly broke down in the course, because I wanted people to understand this. When you apply pressure to your life in certain areas, then this is what's going to cause you to now go into that depressive state. At the end of the day, nothing is really wrong with you. Listen carefully. At the end of the day, nothing is really wrong with you. If you apply pressure to someone, this is what's going to happen. You really have to understand this concept for you to even get out of depression. There's nothing wrong with you. Something is applying pressure. And if you don't take care of that pressure, then you're going to go into something wrong with you. So you truly have to understand that first, right? So I looked at this from what is called the digestive system. Breaks down what elements that either enter the body in order to what? Digest them. Just as academics break things down, such as what? Words, for us to what? Learn them. It's interconnected, or what I would call interrelated. The avenue of where you are in life, if you learn to what? Break things down into the simplest digestible or teachable form, then it allows you to digest them in your life. So if you're in that depressive state, there's some type of pressure that's being applied to your life. All you have to learn is to how to break down that pressure, and it will relieve. So again, I wanted to share this with you because people are walking around and thinking, hey, I'm in a depressive state and this is such and such is wrong with me. Nothing is wrong with you. If you understand the dynamic of the body, when you put pressure on it, this is what's going to happen. It's going to go into that imbalanced state. That doesn't mean something is wrong. And I could give you something that I use in the context of the course. Thanksgiving just passed. You know, if you ate too much food, what would happen to you? You would go into that sleeping stage. You know why? Because you ate too much food. Nothing is wrong with you. That's what the body does. It shuts down when there's too much coming in. The same thing, if you get up today and you drink too much water, what's going to happen? You're going to go to the bathroom and pee. Why? Because you put too much water inside of you. Is something wrong with you? No. It just means that, hey, there's too much. And then what the body does, it articulates itself in such a manner that it sends us to the bathroom to urinate and get rid of that extra stuff. When you get rid of that extra stuff, then it starts to now function effectively. It's the same thing with depression. When things are pressuring you, this is what the body is going to do. It's going to shut itself down. You have to learn how to now get over that concept of where you would think that you're in some type of sickness to now to the avenue of where you're saying, hey, let me find things that could release this pressure, and you'll realize how you start to actually come out of that concept. And this is my own pressure money. And for me, it's like I did that. I started to do these little things that release the pressure of what I was thinking back then, which included me thinking that my friends did all these things to actually put me into this circumstance where I was actually depressed. Once I started to let that go and say, hey, I got to take my own responsibility and fix my own life, like that little thing that was pressuring me saying, hey, these are close friends. Like when I tell you, one of those friends was my right-hand friend. So when I looked at it, I was like, hey, this person, my right hand, did this to me. That was the pressure that was being applied to me mentally. But when I was able to let that go, it started to now go into the mode where I moved from that mental depression to where I started to now thrive into what is called mental aviation. So those are the 5 things that I really want to talk about and share with you as you're moving forward for 2023 and even beyond. These are things that could significantly help your life. And this is just a recap. What I did, even though I was talking about the Great Depression, it wasn't about just talking about the Great Depression. It's the concept of knowing what actually happened in the past. It's a form of what is called understanding. The next thing, sleeping, it's not just sleeping, it's what is called a regiment. A regiment is needed for you to grow. Doing is a part of what is called expectation. You have to do certain things. You're not going to sit there and your life is just going to get better just like that. So what you have to do, learn how to practice the little things to make your life better. The same thing, I did the activity. The activity is actually what I call the connection of the law. So you have to truly understand that when you start to act in a certain manner, there's a law that you connect with. So this is what I did with the balloon activity. And then finally, the 5th thing that I shared, it was around aviating, which means ascending. Like, yeah, I was in that depressive state, but I had to learn how to ascend over that state of my life. So these were things that I just shared with you from a different angle. I call it the Great Depression or the sleeping concept, but these were things that I was doing in the background, showing you how to understand certain things. What is needed for you to grow? What do you need to practice? Those small little things that you practice. And there is a law that's out there that really comes into play and help you with these things. And it helps you to get to what is called a higher level. So the rat experiment, I didn't go through it, but I will place it in the chat right here where you can literally click on it and you'll be able to actually watch it at some point and you'll see the rat experiment and understand what was done. Right here, connecting. So I kept on saying this, right? And it wasn't just saying this because I wanted to say it. So an active mind is a source of power. So act, in the word act. So let's take this from what is called the Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act is a law. It's a law because certain things was going on. So they created what is called the Civil Rights Act. The act now becomes a law. Understand this, when you start to do certain things and it's active, then it connects with the universe, which there's this universal law that comes in and help you out in what's going on. So this is a big part of where I was saying an active mind is a source of power. When you start to activate your mind, then there's a universal law that actually comes in and start to help you out. Majority of the things that I learned or discovered wasn't based on my own aspect. It was me having that active mind that became a source of the power that I now utilize on a day-to-day basis to drive my life to a whole new destination. Again, an active mind is a source of power. There are greater elements that are out there. When you activate your mind, it allows you now to connect with those sources, and those sources start to now help you out in your situation. And then this is right here, and more factor. Remember in the beginning, I said, hey, pay attention to this. Have you ever heard of the Great Depression that happened twice? No. And the reason why the Great Depression didn't happen twice is because they learned from the past. And they realized that back then, even two of the things that was going on was that the factor that they were looking at was construction and the automobile industry. Those were the two industries that were driving society. What they decided to do now was to add more industry. So you will never have another Great Depression. So you have never heard of it before after that one. So these are things that you have to understand. The more factor, the more you get to do more things now, the more it opens you up to come out of those circumstances that you are actually in. This is right here is the final concept as I talk about more. I do what is called the if-then statement. I learned about this in technology. So in this case, is a concept of what is called if-then. So this is something that you could actually practice with your brain as you move forward. So in this concept, it's called the hypothesis and conclusion. If this happens, then this will happen. It's actually around the concept of what we would call cause and effect, right? But look at this. This same concept also applies to what is called electronics. So I learned this from electronics, where it's basically you have certain type of circuit, and it's called the if-then statement. You write these codes that allows the circuit to go into this. I'll give you an example. If you walk into a dark room, if you click the switch and it goes up, if the switch goes up, then this will happen. The light will come on. So it's called the if-then statement. And when I understood that many years ago, I started to utilize it in my own life. What did I do? I trained my brain for it. Hey, if I'm in this circumstance, then this is what I want to happen. If I'm in this circumstance, this is what and I continue to train my brain. This is what I want, the if-then statement. And this is something that you can apply to your life. I'm telling you, it truly works. The amount of what I would call challenges or difficulties or obstacles that I've encountered, but I have what is called the if-then statement that I program in my mind. If I encounter some type of difficulty, how do you translate that into something greater? Next thing that I would share now, 5. So I said I was going to share 5 things, right? The 5 things is not just sharing 5 things. If you understand the brain is what is called a mechanism that's in the context of what is called the electrical circuit. So if you understand that it's an electrical circuit, then it works with what is called electrons. Electrons is what is called the negative part of the circuit. Or what you would say if you're doing math, you have odd and even. So it's the odd part. So 5 is actually an odd number, meaning that, hey, the brains work majority with what? Odd things. Which is why when people are going through odd times in their life, right? They normally tell them to do what? Think positively. Why? Because the odd circumstances there, so you need to add the positive, and then now it helps you to get out of the circumstance. That is because they understand that the brain is what you would call an electronic circuit, and if it's an electronic circuit, then it's working based on the concept of electrons. Electrons meaning that it's the negative side of the circuit, which is the concept of how light is actually created. When you have the circuit, you have the negative part and you have the positive part. When you put them together, then you create light. So again, I want you to understand these things. An active mind is a source of power. And right here is where we come to a conclusion. It's an offer. For those who are out there and they're listening, it's an offer that we're offering you. It's what is called the online course for mental depression to mental aviation. These things that I just shared with you are some of the things that I've utilized over the past couple of years to move myself out of what is called the mental depression to now where I'm mentally thriving with my life, including some of the things that I'm doing today, right? So I went from what is called mental depression and utilizing the aviation industry to now pull myself out of that circumstance and push my life into a whole new destination. It is a course that we just finished, and going back to what Dr. Gabor said, right? What is considered normal in societies is actually toxic to human well-being. What is considered normal in society is actually toxic in human well-being. And I can't express that enough. So I'll show you how this became an offer. This is where it's available. For those who are interested, you could literally go to here, the airportadventure.teachable.com. A link will be shared in the chat if you're interested. You can order it from there, and it's an offer. I'm making you an offer. Why am I making you an offer? Because of this word. You have to learn how to break things down. Offer. Offer comes with the root word, which is called off. And when you're off, this is what happens. You're off balance. So what has been going on for the past couple of years with a pandemic in our life, it has made us what? Off balance. So what you have to do, you have to literally learn how to balance back your life. That's all that's going on with your life. Yes, I understand all these other things that you're seeing, but the only thing that's really going on with your life right now, it's off balance. Something came and mentally impacted you. And then that now started to occupy your space. And if it's occupying your space, then it's going to relocate in your life. And at some point, you're going to see the germination. So the concept of what's happening in the world right now, people are just off balance. And all we're doing now is just to make you an offer and saying, hey, from mental depression to mental aviation, we're offering you something that you could utilize and balance back your life. So again, if you're interested, the link is going to be inside the chat. It's the airportadventure.teachable.com, right? So again, I want to thank everyone that's on here and who came out for this webinar today. Thank you so much. If you don't have any other questions or comment, I'm thanking you for your time and your energy. Once again, an active mind is a source of power. It is your energy. It's a source of power. And once you're able to utilize it, you're able to now move your life from where it is right now to where you need it to be. The webinar has come to an end. And once again, we thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time and thank you for your energy.